Welcome to the Arabesque Scissors YouTube channel. I'm Ali Phillips, and in this video I'm going to take you through how to add the internal cover flaps that will hold your notebook in place inside the Creator's Compendium. So one of the features that I have here is an internal zip, and so we're going to be adding this zip in, and I've got a neat little trick to reduce the bulk underneath the interfacing for this. So I'll take you through how to do that. And then when we've made both of these, we'll be sewing the little pockets onto the front of them. Now, if you love instructional sewing videos that help you grow in your skills as a sewist, please consider hitting that subscribe button and giving this video a like. And if you have any questions or comments or suggestions for future patterns for me, please leave me a comment. So just grab both of your inner cover flaps. So you'll need 2 of them, and you'll need 2 cuts of each of the interfacings. And if you haven't already done it, you'll need to round your corners using the fabric corner template, and you'll also need to round 2 of the corners on each of the interfacings, but you're only going to need to round 2 of the corners, so just make sure you leave 2 of them straight, and just place the interfacing template on the corner there and just trace that around, and then just trim off those corners. So just grab one of your inner cover flaps and fold them wrong sides together, and then we're just going to give them both of them a really good press. So get that crease happening in there by pressing them in half, and then repeat that for the second inner cover flap. So now we've prepared these, you need to select one to be the left hand one and one to be the right hand. So we're going to start working on the left inner cover flap, which has the internal zipper inside of it. So just put the other flap aside. So I'm going to show you a technique for reducing the bulk that's underneath the internal zip here. So I'll be cutting out the layers of interfacing that are underneath this window here, so that when the pocket is pulled through to the other side and pressed in place, there's just less layers of bulk. Now this step is totally optional, and if you're used to inserting a zip with the interfacing still being there, you can just go right ahead and install this as normal. But if you'd like to try this new technique, just follow along and I'll show you how to do it. So you can either cut out the window and trace it on top of the interfacing, or you can just place the interfacing on top and just trace the window through the interfacing. Now for this to work, you really do need to try and be as accurate as possible. So just try to make sure that you haven't got anything moving here, and I like to use a ruler to follow the line nice and precisely. So just repeat this for the second piece of interfacing. So just use your ruler to get everything nice and straight. And then go ahead and cut everything out. So you're going to want both of these windows to align exactly on top of each other. So now go ahead and open the left cover flap so the wrong side is facing up. And what we're going to be doing is fusing the interfacing onto the right hand side here, so that when this is flipped over it will be on the left hand side with the interfacing behind it. So just place the woven interfacing onto the right hand side, and you're going to align this to the right hand side of the fold, and just take your time to get everything straight and get the seam allowance even all the way around, and of course make sure you've got your glue side down. Then just give it a really good press, give it plenty of steam. Now just take the second stiffer interfacing and lay that over the top, and this one's a little bit easier to work with because it's less warpy, and because we can't iron directly on top of this, we're just going to carefully flip it over to the other side and then just peel it back and check that everything's still lined up, because you do want to get these exactly lining up with each other. And then just give that a really good press with the iron. So you're going to need plenty of steam, and just work your way along until you get everything nicely fused together. So just peel this back and have a good check that you've actually got everything really securely fused. Now just fold that back in half again and give it another really good press to get that crease nice and sharp again. So now we have the interfacing on the right hand side of the wrong side of the fabric, and we're just going to flip this over so the fabric is right side up, but the interfacing is underneath the left hand side. So now we're going to be installing the zip on the left hand side with the interfacing window that we've cut out on this side. So the next step is to install the pocket A. So I'm just going to align this to the left hand side of the fold here with the straight edge of the pocket, and then just measure that just to make sure you're getting that centered on the flap there. And then you can just grab some pins and just hold that in place. So now we're going to start stitching on this short side, then all the way up this long side here and up the other side. And when you come to the side where you've got the little opening that you've left open there, just make sure that you're catching both of those layers nice and neatly there and locking everything neatly into place. Now give this pocket a really good press, and then just check one more time that you have actually sewn this on the interfacing. So now we're ready to set this aside and prepare the inner pocket lining. So just grab your inner pocket lining and flip it over to the wrong side, and then on one of the short sides we're going to mark the box that we need to prepare for the zipper rectangle. So I'm measuring in 1/2 inch down one of the short sides here, and then I'm marking a second line 5/8 of an inch further in from that. Then I'm measuring up 1/2 inch from the bottom and 1/2 inch from the top, and then double check that your rectangle measures 8.5 inches long by 5/8 of an inch wide. Now just grab your inner cover flap again and double check that you're going to be working on the interfacing side. Then take your pocket lining here and lay it right side down, and you're going to be centering that window over that interfacing window that we cut out. So just double check that you've got this 3/4 of an inch in from the short side here, and I'm just going to take some pins and pin this around the window here. So now we're going to stitch around this window, and you can either stitch from the interfacing side or along the marked rectangle. Now just make sure that you're sewing as accurately as you can here and stopping with your needle exactly in those corners. So just flip your work over and just check if you've managed to stitch inside that rectangle of the interfacing, and if you've caught a few bits, that should be okay. So just go and give that a bit of a press. So now I'm just going to make a cut into the center of that rectangle through both of those layers of fabric, and then just cut nice and straight up the middle of that rectangle until you come to about 1/2 inch away from the bottom of the rectangle, and then just turn your scissors and cut out into the corner of the rectangle just to make a V shape, but make sure not to cut your stitches. Then just flip it around and cut down to the other side, and cut a little V when you get to the other end, making sure not to cut through your stitching line. So now you can push this pocket through the window and just flip your work over. And then we're just going to pull and manipulate this until we can get everything pulled through and start to even out the seam here to get this seam that we've just sewed nicely on the edge of this fabric. So just pull this out until you can see that seam is exactly on the edge there, and then just grab some clips and just hold that in place and work your way down, pulling it into place and getting that seam nicely on the edge, and keep putting clips in place. Now the sides and the top section are probably the fiddliest part here because they're quite narrow, so you just have to really pull them hard and hold them in place, and then pop a clip in to hold it out of the way. So just work your way along the top here to the other side. So now you can grab your iron and just press and remove your clips as you come to them, and work your way along the length of the rectangle, and just keep pulling everything around and manipulating everything into place until it's nice and straight. It does take a little bit of patience, but the result is worth it. Now just flip everything over to the right side and tuck the little edges under, and then you can give it a really good press from the top. So now I'm going to prepare the zipper for being installed underneath that window. So I'm just going to put some of the double-sided Dritz tape here, and so just run that along the outer edge of the zipper tape here. Make sure that you're getting that stuck down really firmly. And then run another row of it along the other side of the zipper tape. Now just check the orientation of your flap here, so make sure this is on the left hand side, and then make sure that you've got your zip as it's closing, that it's going to be closing towards the top. So just go ahead and remove one side of the tape, making sure that that sticky side is staying stuck to the zipper tape. And then go ahead and place your opening of your rectangle over the top of the zipper tape, just checking that you've got it centered over the tape so you've not got a gap. And then just wiggle that down over that zipper pull and get that as straight as you can, centered over that edge. And now you can grab your zipper pull and just gently pull that up to the left hand side. So now you can just keep adjusting that and pushing that down until you're happy with how straight that is, and then you can just reach underneath, and we're just going to remove the paper back from the rest of the tape. So now you can just lay that down as straight as you can get that. Try and make it even along the edge of the zipper tape, and then just push that all down into place. And now you can give it all a quick press if you'd like to, just to try and flatten everything back down again, and then we can take this to the sewing machine and stitch around the outer edge at 1/8 of an inch seam allowance. So I'm top stitching along here with my zipper foot, sewing as straight as I can, and when I get to each of the end section I'll be back stitching along here. I'll also be pulling my threads underneath to try and neaten up my join when I get back to the beginning. So now we've got the zipper nicely installed and it's looking really cute. now just flip your work wrong sides up again, and we're going to sew this internal pocket together now. So just grab the pocket and fold it right sides together and line up the raw edge with the raw edge along the zipper tape. And now we're just going to pin and clip the sides of this pocket together. So make sure that you're lifting the pocket up here and you're not clipping or pinning it through to the front. So we're just working through the layers of the pocket here. So I'm pinning and clipping around on all three sides here. And then I'm going to be flipping my work over again. And I'm going to be sewing with the exterior facing me, but I'll be pulling it out of the way and sewing down the side of the pocket here. And I'll be lifting the front side of it out of the way here and sewing down this narrow edge here. And then turning it and pulling out the remaining side of the exterior so that I can sew down that last side of the pocket. Make sure that I'm catching those little triangles on the side of the zipper tape. So just take your time here. This is a little bit fiddly because you have to lift that side out of the way. So make sure you're catching those little triangles on the edge of the zipper tape. Then lift out the front section and sew down along those raw edges along the edge of the zipper tape. And then turn and catch those remaining little triangles and then sew down the final side of the pocket. So now you can set that aside and we're going to move on to the right cover flap. So open this out so it's wrong sides facing up, and then take your interfacing and you're going to lay the woven interfacing down on the left side with the glue facing down and aligning this to the left hand side of the crease here. So just take your time to make sure you're getting this centered, and then grab your iron and fuse that into place, giving it a really good press. Now take your remaining piece of interfacing and make sure you've got the glue side facing down, and then just place that right over the top of the first interfacing. Now flip it over to the right side, making sure that everything stays aligned in place there, and then just grab your iron. And now's the time you really need to fuse this in very carefully, because you want this to fuse through all those layers and be nicely stuck in place. Okay, so now you can fold this back in half and just make sure that you're aligning those edges really carefully, and just press that crease back into place so that it's nice and sharp again. So now we're going to flip this over so that it's right sides up. Make sure we're working with the interfacing on the right hand side. So now it's time to prepare your pocket placement template. So just cut both of those out, and then you're going to stick them together and align that bottom piece to the line where the arrows are pointing. So make sure that you can just only see one of the lines here when you join these together. Then I'm just going to add a piece of tape, just a very short one, onto each end of this, and that way you're not getting any of the tape over the holes that you will be poking through. So we'll be keeping these holes free from the tape. So we'll be using this as our guide to mark where the pockets are going to be sewn. So just grab yourself a pin here. I've got quite a sizable hat pin here, and I'm going to be poking that through, right through the centre of each of these holes, and giving this a bit of a wiggle to make a hole big enough that I can mark my pen through. So just go and poke a hole through each of these holes. So just place your template onto the right hand side of this flap here and make sure everything's nicely lined up, and then just with your pen you're going to mark through onto the fabric through those holes that we've marked, through all 12 of those holes, and make sure that you can see those marks on the other side. So now we're ready to attach our pockets B and C and the flaps. So I like to start by lining up pocket B. So just align that with the lower 4 dots that you've got here, matching up those top corners, and just making sure that that's nice and straight on those dots. So just make sure that you're not shifting anything as you place those pins in. So just check at the end that everything's still lined up with those dots. Then you can grab pocket B and align that with the top 4 dots that you've got there. Just checking that everything's going to be nice and straight and those corners are right on those dots. And then just grab a few more pins and just pin that into place. So now we can take this to the sewing machine and stitch around each of these curved edges at 1/8 of an inch seam allowance. So I've just switched back to my regular sewing foot here, and as you come over those openings where you've turned it through, just make sure you're catching both of those edges and take it really slowly as you go around those curves just to get it nice and smooth. So just take this flap and align it with these remaining centre 2 dots and the top flap, and align that with the top 2 dots. And put a pin into each of these, just making sure that the pin is not making it all shift as you push it in. So just check that everything is still straight and level, and then we can take it to the sewing machine and stitch across the top of each of these. So now I've got my trusty stiletto that I'm using to keep all my layers together, and just making sure that I've got everything properly aligned with those dots, so everything's going to end up nice and straight. So just give your pockets a quick press, and now we're ready to fold this back in half and baste this together. So just clip around the edges, make sure you're lining up those raw edges nice and straight, and then just work your way around, putting clips all the way around the edges. Now just baste around the raw edges at 1/8 of an inch seam allowance, and just repeat that for the left inner cover flap. So now we're ready to add the pen holders onto this right flap. So just grab each of those and then grab your ruler, and we're going to mark down from this top straight edge about 3.5 inches and make a mark, and then measure up from the bottom edge and make a mark at 2.5 inches. Now take your elastic pen holder and align the top of the elastic with the top mark, and take your fabric pen holder and align the bottom of the fabric pen holder with the bottom mark, and then you can baste these in place at the sewing machine.